38, Big 550, KTRS. Friday came word, I guess the late Thursday, early Friday morning came word that the mapping agency decided to stay in the city of St. Louis. However, they're going to relocate to North County. Joe Miller with the Show Me Institute policy analyst. Good morning. Thanks, Joe Miller.
Thanks for having me.
What's the big deal? This is all good news, right?
Well, it's relocating from an area in Soulard, basically next to the brewery,
right.
And it's going up to North City, actually,
right.
Just north of the old Pruitt-Igoe site.
Right.
Basically, this was never going to leave the region entirely. It was either going to go there, or it was going to go somewhere in St. Louis County, or it was going to go somewhere into St. Clair County. So there's been a lot of patting each other on the back for something that we really weren't going to lose to begin with. It was sort of like an interplay.
They're staying here where they were always staying here. Right.
Pretty much. I mean, this was becoming like when we see municipalities fight over development, well, now we had basically Illinois and St. Clair County and St. Louis City fight over a development. But this has been gussied up into some sort of huge victory that they're going to redevelop this whole area, which is a pretty strange idea, I think.
Right. But so what are you insinuating? Would you have rather them just go to Southern Illinois?
I think that in this case, there's an actual human cost for this thing to relocate to North City. People actually live in that area.
Right.
They're going to use eminent domain. They're going to kick people out of their homes, and they're going to have to go someplace else. As opposed to in St. Clair County near Shiloh Scott, if they had gone there, that was a cornfield. No one was going to have to be forcibly moved out of where they had lived for decades. I mean,
outside of the Gophers, no one's being thrown out. But eminent domain isn't we're going to take your house and good luck to you. You do get some type of compensation for the house you own.
We've written about this a couple times before, and one of the problems in this specific situation is that if you use eminent domain, they give you a sort of a fair market value for your house. But one of the problems is that these houses are in areas that are not wealthy. Those houses probably don't have a very large value to them. But if you've been living there for a couple decades, you know that neighborhood, you're used to that neighborhood. But if you get a check for $20,000, $40,000 and you're sent to go look for someplace else to live, that could be really bad, because then what can you afford that you're going to be comfortable in and safe in? And I really hope that no matter how that goes forward with eminent domain, that they really think about those people and where they're going to go.
Right. However, the house that is not in the footprint, that is across the street from a $1 billion development, their house just went from $20,000 to $100,000 in value because their neighborhood just got a lot better.
Well, I mean, I don't know how far this is going to go with redevelopment. Top secret spy agencies have never before, ever, been the focus point of a neighborhood in terms of development. This is not something that happens. I mean, look at the NGA. It's been in basically the south part of Soulard for decades.
Right.
And more business has gone to Gus's and a couple of bars in the area,
right.
and even some gas stations, according to the Post-Dispatch. But those areas around it, they ebbed and flowed with the general fortunes of the area. And, there's no lofts at the NGA. And I don't think the NGA would particularly want that. They want a low profile.
It's an interesting argument. I would love to see, because Southern Illinois went after the business, St. Louis had to drop their bid, drop their pants, give them free land, give them free all of this. And so the question is, ultimately, since both sides tried to out-negotiate the other, how much less is it going to benefit the region because both sides negotiated for that golden ticket?
We have a situation here where the tax revenue that the city would have lost or the state would have lost is really unknown, because it was just going to move across to Shiloh Scott. Who knows who would have moved from St. Louis City or from St. Louis County to be closer to it? I mean, that's an open question. We don't know. But what we do know now is basically that with all of this sort of free giveaway that they're doing for the NGA, this is going to cost the city and the state over $100 million. And their grand plans to redevelop the area, which don't really involve the people who live there now, is going to cost probably hundreds of millions more. And it really, the success of any sort of redevelopment in this area is not going to come down to whether or not the NGA moved up there. It's going to come down to because you have the NGA, for some reason, are some other businesses going to move in and out? Because these types of spy installations, they're not places that typically people live close to. They're not typically places where people go out into the community and spend a whole lot of money. They are places where people drive in, do work, and drive out in a very low profile way.
Right. Well, you can argue that there's not a whole lot. I mean, Soulard is sort of a nice neighborhood, but I lived in Soulard. I had no idea the NGA was there. I'd never heard of the NGA until this whole deal came up.
And ironically, Soulard, which has been doing a lot better recently, actually the part that's grown the fastest has actually been the north part, which is furthest away from the NGA and closest to that farmers market.
Right.
So is the farmers market, which probably costs very little, doesn't really have that many employees, but it provides an amenity for the area, has actually been a larger draw probably than the NGA in the south. Because if the NGA is in Benton Park, or if it had moved to Shiloh, if it were in the county, or if it were in the city, that employment is there no matter what, and people will choose what neighborhoods they want to live in. It's not the idea that people aren't willing to commute a few minutes to work is just false, especially when they can have their pick of very nice neighborhoods in St. Louis.
Yeah, especially if it's such a boon for North City, why isn't it such a bust for Soulard then?
Yeah, no one's talking about Benton Park going to implode at the end of this, because we're probably not going to see much movement in population, and if anything happens around it, I think that it's going to take a lot more than just having the NGA. And unfortunately, the people who live in that neighborhood now are the ones who are really going to be paying for this.
It's also a dirty little secret we're not talking about. Is it redeveloping North City, or is it just pushing whatever bad element is in North City somewhere else? We got to go. Yeah. We can talk. Tune in next week.
Yeah.
The plot thickens. Joe Miller, Show Me Institute Policy Analyst. What's the website?
You can see everything we write about this at showmeinstitute.org.
How'd you get to work today?
I took the Metrolink.
Metrolink again?
That's right.
Holy mackerel. Did you pay?
Oh, we won't talk about that on the air, will we?
No, there you go. Plot thickens. 8:45, Big 550, KTRS.